Hello everybody, welcome back to the Old Warlock. I'm Alex.
I'm Jim.
And today we're going to be talking about some Dungeons & Dragons history, which we know that all of you guys love based on the views that we get on some of our videos. And today we wanted to talk about a lesser known, a little bit more obscure DM character in the history of Dungeons & Dragons named Joe Fischer.
Joe Fischer. As Alexander was saying, well, one of the things that we find really of interest here at the Old Warlock is the history of Dungeons & Dragons.
It's true.
And really, it's not so much the corporate level of history that we're interested in. In other words, what was going on with Gary Gygax and TSR. Although we do enjoy that.
We do.
It's kind of it's almost a finite story. Where we've really started to turn our interests is toward the history of Dungeons & Dragons, especially the early history, 1970s, early 1980s. The history that involved people actually playing at the table. What kind of things were people doing then in order to expand the game? Because really, at the beginning, back in the mid-70s, this is what you had to go with for rules. And I can tell you from experience that at that time, there was an awful lot of creativity going on because there really weren't many parameters that you had to play within in terms of rule systems. And so, and another thing is that you really kind of developed your campaign in a vacuum at that time. There weren't a lot of influences, external influences. I mean, nowadays you have Critical Role that you can watch. You can watch no end of streams of Dungeons & Dragons games.
Or you could fire up the Lord of the Rings movies and take inspiration from that.
Right.
You know, in an age where you can Google everything, like what I've grown up in, where you have all of the information you could ever need right there in front of you.
Right.
The levels of strict creativity have maybe decreased a little bit because you can take inspiration from so many places so easily, as opposed to having to come up with all of these things by yourself.
So what we've been doing lately is looking back, and we're trying to find more stories that come from the table level of Dungeons & Dragons back in those days. Just try and find out how people were playing the game individually, because I'm sure, as those of you who have watched the videos know, the videos that we've created know, I started playing in 1978. I'm really curious to know what the game was like for people who were playing in Sheboygan or Miami or someplace in Alabama. What were their games like compared to mine? Because we didn't have any basis for comparison really outside of things that you saw in the Dragon magazine, and if you were lucky enough to go to a convention, you might have seen how the game was being played there. But you really didn't know. You really didn't have that much influence from other players outside from your really local immediate group. Really what we've decided to do is go back and start rereading the Dragon magazine.
The original ones
from episode one, from volume 1. And moving forward, we've also gone back and looked at the precursor to the Dragon, which is Strategic Review. And there were about 7 issues of that came out. And we're talking here 1975, right into 1976. But one of the things that we found, looking for, again, inspiration or the history of the game at that level, at that table level, there's a guy by the name of Joe Fischer who produced things in the last issue of Strategic Magazine and the first 2 issues, I believe it was, of the Dragon.
2 or 3, yeah.
And
this guy makes me mad. Let me tell you what. I'm 20 years old, almost 21. I'm a pretty young guy, but this Joe Fischer was what, 16, 17?
16, 17 when he was creating things for inclusion in the Dragon.
Yeah, and he made lasting impacts on the world of Dungeons & Dragons and what it became. He knew Gary Gygax. He played D&D with Gary Gygax. He came up with the Ranger class that you see in original Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah.
That's his creation. And then he also wrote a bunch of articles.
Like you're saying, creative guy.
Very creative guy. For being a teenager and coming up with things that were put into this, even though it wasn't a huge magazine, it was an important magazine that people were subscribed to, and it had impact on games like these.
And one of the things that we noticed in reading this, number one, it's great to see somebody talking about his ideas for Dungeons & Dragons at that time. But we're also pleased to see that he ran kind of a dangerous campaign. The things that we're going to talk about today, they weren't friendly to players, but they're also a lot of fun as far as I'm concerned. And the bottom line of it is that these are some of the best, most creative things that I've come across from that time period. Mm-hmm. So we're going to pick up with the contributions to D&D by Joe Fischer with his hints for D&D judges. And if you look here on this page, you will see that he talks about a couple of different things. First of all, he's got a really interesting way to use skeletons inside of a dungeon.
A good example of this is a party, upon entering a room in the dungeons, finds a pile of bones in one corner. Discovering nothing else of interest, the leader decides to take the time to reconstruct the skeleton. Once put together, the skeleton can do one of 4 things: attack, serve the party until destroyed, lead to the nearest unguarded treasure, or lead to his master, who happens to be a high-level magic user. Or the skeleton can do nothing except take up a lot of time, in which the judge can roll dice for more wandering monsters. So this is just something that we liked because it's something that's kind of unorthodox. It's not necessarily you open a chest and something explodes, or you open a door and a poison dart shoots out at you. It's another idea for something that can happen in a dungeon that might not ever happen. It's an option for something that's there, that if the players come across this skeleton...
And they put the skeleton together.
And they put the skeleton together because they don't have anything better to do, or one of the guys is like, hey, look at all those bones. Looks like there's a complete skeleton. Why not put it together? Let's see what happens. That then something can be triggered and something can happen. And you have a lot of options for what can follow next. But at the same time, it's not necessarily likely that anybody going through your dungeon, especially if they're stupid, is ever going to try and put together this skeleton. And it might just sit there forever unused, but at least for the D&D judge, as Joe Fischer puts it, it's something that you know is there, and it's something that puts more detail and adds more storyline into your world because somebody put those bones there and they enchanted them for some reason.
So you might be saying to yourselves, well, that's no big deal. We do this kind of thing all the time. Keep in mind what we said earlier. This is at the very outset. Those of us who play today, we've got all kinds of influences that we can come up with these kinds of things. But moving on to another thing that Joe Fischer put in. And Joe Fischer, you know, I like to pride myself on being known as a dangerous dungeon master. I'm not a deadly dungeon master, but I'm a dangerous dungeon master, a DDM, if you will.
Yeah, okay.
Dangerous, not deadly. But Joe kind of puts me to shame in terms of some of the things that he talks about involving other traps. Mm-hmm. And one of the cool things that he includes in this part 3, hints for D&D judges, is a random table where you can roll a percentage die or roll percentage dice, mm-hmm. and you can come up with a certain type of trap. Let's talk about that now.
So, if you roll a set of percentage dice when determining these traps, if you roll 0 through 50, it's just a normal chest. He uses a chest as the example here, but you could transpose anything into this. A door, a bigger door, because I couldn't think of anything else.
Or an even bigger door.
So if you roll a 0 to 50, it's just a normal chest, and there's nothing wrong with it. So there's still that, placebo of, oh yeah, it's actually a chest. There's nothing here. Try and fake people out and make them think about things. But if you roll a 51 to 100, then there is a trap on the chest, and you have to go to the table that follows.
Which is another percentage die.
Yeah.
Dice roll.
So then, you roll a percentage dice again. If you get a 0 through 30, 1 to 4 spring-loaded daggers fire when the chest is opened. Not too terrible.
Standard.
31 to 50, same as above, but the daggers are poisoned. Considerably worse.
But standard.
51 to 65, poison gas is released when the chest is opened. 66 to 75, when the chest is opened, it acts as a mirror of life trapping.
There's fun.
That's really fun and very dangerous. 76 to 85, exploding chest. If opened, the chest explodes, doing 2 to 7 dice damage. I'm assuming, yeah, dice hit dice damage. 86 to 90, this is when things really start to get bad. When the chest is opened, an enraged specter comes out.
Which I love.
91 to 95, and this is the bad thing, going back to our undead video. All members within 5 feet or yards? 5 meters?
5 feet.
5 feet lose 1 level of experience.
Yeah.
Because that should be a thing that threatens you. I don't care what any of you say. 96 to 98, all members within 5 feet lose 1 magical item. Again, very punishing.
Go ahead.
And last but not least, 99 to 100, it is an intelligent chest, and act as if the chest is a 2nd to 9th level magic user, and including the spells, so then you have to fight it.
Which is even better to be trying to get to what you think might be some
20 gold
emeralds
pieces and a healing
whatever.
potion,
and
then it
suddenly,
throws a fireball at you.
Yeah, suddenly this chest is an angry 9th level magic user. Now, would I do this? Actually, I would not go this far.
I would.
He would. See, so who's the deadly dungeon master?
I learned from you.
Anyway, I would not have a chest. You know, if you tripped the trap on a chest and you lost a level, that's a little too far.
That's
going
gonna
to
hurt a little bit.
But it's interesting to see that this early dungeon master, Joe Fischer, who was right kind of in the middle of the fix here, he was kind of a deadly DM.
And in all seriousness, if this seems severe, it's because, again, this is in the early days of experimentation with what different things were going to be implemented into the game.
There's a great one in here where he talks about the trap of the intelligent gold pieces. They have a nasty habit of screaming when taken from the room where they were found, which draws all sorts of monsters. Or if you open up the chest and you try to get the gold pieces out of it, they suddenly decide to throw themselves at you en masse, which, again, being pelted to death
stoned to death with gold.
By gold pieces is great, but probably the best one of all of these, as far as I'm concerned.
Because Easter was just here.
Exactly. We just got through
Keeping
Easter.
it on theme.
There you go. This one, more discouraging, is to find out that after fighting a red dragon and losing half the party, in order to win 60,000 gold pieces, they discover that those 60,000 gold pieces are actually gold-wrapped chocolate coins. And they have a very real value of only a copper piece each. To me, that's great. It's one of those things
the looks of horror that would be on the faces of the surviving party members.
Or anger.
Horror, visceral,
exactly.
anger.
Sometimes that's what you live for as a DM, you know. But anyway.
Well, that's about it for this episode where we're going to talk about Joe Fischer. Just some ideas there, kind of giving you some background history about how D&D sort of learned its balance over the course of its existence, and how these steps of some more brutal rules were come up with, some more brutal ideas were come up with by people like Joe Fischer in order to get the game to be where it is today.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about some other things developed by Joe Fischer in another video.
Sure will.
For this one, that's all I've got.
We'll see you next time.
Joe Fischer, if you're out there, drop us a line. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, if any of you know where Joe Fischer is, that would be fantastic. And be sure to follow us on Instagram @officialoldwarlock. We'll see you next time.
Keep it short on Pre.
Bye.